We're really excited at KenWatch. We just received our official EcoSOX status. So this is our first year of having it and experience with the United Nations having it. So we're really looking to both capitalize on that new access for our members, as well as to involve ourselves in the exciting things happening. And what a year to be beginning to engage in that because of Beijing Plus 25, which, as we know, was such a critical moment for our sector and the international development community, and for the gender equality movement more broadly. As you know, the last 24, well, let's say the last 72 hours have really shifted the landscape for folks at CSW. They've shifted the landscape, I think, globally for how we engage. Lots of questions about, with the coronavirus, the cancellation or postponement or scaling back of the UN CSW. What does that mean for us? We would love to have come to you with a full baked strategy to say this is what it means and this is how we can address it. But we haven't had the time to develop that. And so we really wanted to focus this conversation on, rather than the roadmap and how to get involved, because that's shifted. Why did your organization want to get involved in the first place? So what is drawing you to this conversation? And I think if we can collect throughout this webinar those whys, then we can start building together alongside you a collective strategy for the how. So we expected this webinar to be the practical how-to guide, but instead I think we need to take a step back and just say, what were you hoping to get out of CSW in these moments? And therefore, how can we shift and pivot to make sure that we're still all getting that out of those? And I know this is a global conversation. It's not just us here in Canada that are having it. So we're committed to keeping you as up to date as possible on everything we know, you'll know. But I think that understanding the why behind why our members are excited about this, why they showed up at this webinar, will help us shape out the communications that we have with you in the next little while. And yes, and I was supposed to share with you that the official what is happening is that on March 9th, the commission will convene for one day only. So essentially all side events, all extra events that really form the ecosystem of and action plans, and really the stuff that goes on outside of the official proceedings are often can shape actions and movements for the next year. None of that will be happening. So everything has been canceled, and organizations pretty much from what I see without fail are following suit. So with that, I will introduce my colleagues who are on the line, some of whom I can see, because you can't see everyone at the same time. First of all, Megan Aikens is our Director of Strategic Partnerships and Gender Equality, and Megan will moderate the question period later today. She's also, if you don't know her and haven't worked with her, an excellent person to reach out and engage with on all things related to government relations and strategic partnerships. Caitlin Reed is the driver that's doing the technical support today, but is our Senior Communications Officer and will be play a critical role in that communications, in the communications we have with you about CSW and what's happening. So please reach out to her on that. Erin Jex over there is our Gender Equality Officer, working on our own strategy here at KenWatch on gender equality, both internally and externally. Maria Wong and Aminata Wuri are new to our team as Stakeholder Engagement Officer and Global Partnerships Officer, focusing, working with Megan and the team around government relations, all things UN, and come with both come with a huge background in those areas, and we're very pleased to have them. So with no further ado, I'm excited to present today's facilitator, Anna Falth. Anna and I actually saw each other last week at an event, but didn't get a chance to meet, so I'm really excited. I got a bit of a taste of her speaking, and I'm really excited to hear from you today, Anna. So Anna heads up the Secretariat for Women's Empowerment Principles and manages the EU-funded program We Empower, which I got to hear a little bit about last week, thinking about how responsible businesses conduct themselves in G7 countries. And she provides the strategic policy and partnership advice, manages the Global Network for Women's Economic Empowerment, empowerwomen.org, that promotes online collaboration, learning, and innovation to advance women's economic empowerment across the world. She also leads the UN women's work on STEM and technology and is an economist with more than 20 years of experience as an advisor within the UN system, including UNCTAD, UN DESA, and UNDP. And she's been with UN Women since 2010. So huge thank you and gratitude to Anna for joining us and agreeing to really bring to us that all that experience with the UN and help us understand it, help our members understand really what it is that CSW represents and what it is we can do. And so I will turn the floor over to Anna.
Thank you so much, Julia. Can you hear me? Sound is working?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here. Despite all the different hiccups that you alluded to. I will go into some of those a little bit more in detail in a few minutes. So I think I can drive this presentation myself. You may wonder why we have here on the first slide Women's Empowerment Principles and how that links to all of your work, but I will get to that towards the end of the presentation. Let me see if I can move this myself. Yes, or maybe somebody did it. So for those who are probably very young, or for those that are in the private sector, I'm going to take just a moment to look at the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. I took some pictures of my own platform for action that has been used and used and used for many, many years. And this was adopted in 1995 and has still today is seen as the most visionary agenda for gender equality and women's empowerment. And what is really amazing with the Platform for Action is that it was adopted anonymously by 189 member states, many of which would not, unfortunately, adopt the same text today. And we often talk about, can't we have a fifth world conference? We are trying to kind of stay away from that because we know that there might be some issues, particularly issues in your sector, that might be compromised. So we are trying to stick, and the other piece of it is that many of these areas have not yet been implemented, and there's a long way to go. We hear from many different studies that it go from 100 to 300 years before we can achieve gender equality. So what we have in the Beijing Platform Declaration and Platform for Action is far from having been implemented. And there's no country in the world that can say that they have achieved gender equality. The Beijing Platform for Action included 12 critical areas of concern. And I'm also putting them up here because once we come to what's the plan for the next 5 years, you will see a lot of commonalities in this list of the 12 critical areas of concern that were identified in 95 and adopted by the member states. And you can see that even though we have distilled them down to 6 areas. Also, I just wanted to put, this is Hillary Clinton on 5th of September 1995. This is the very kind of well-known phrase that she, in her speech on the 5th of September during the Fourth World Conference in Beijing. Human rights are women's rights, and women's rights are human rights. So this was the first time where this was really being pronounced in a global stage in this very, very strong way. It started a bit bumpy, as we heard earlier. Unfortunately, we had to scale down on the CSW 64. And there will only be proceedings on the 9th of March. However, for clarification, the session needs to open and will open as predicted on the 9th of March. And it will open to be able to adopt the political declaration. It's already finalized and member states have already agreed on it. And it will adopt a few resolutions that have also been agreed upon. So there's a lot of prep work that has going into it. And the purpose of the session on the 9th of March is really to open the session, adopt these declarations or resolutions, and then suspend the session. And it will be suspended until further notice when we have time to resume it. And it needs to be resumed. The session could happen sometime before the 17th of July. 17th of July is then when the Economic and Social Council will meet and need to adopt the report of the Commission on the Status of Women. So sometime, depending on the situation with the coronavirus, the session will be resumed. We don't know how that session will look like, if it will be as discussed and planned for March, or if it will be a scale down. So that will also be determinant on the situation of the outbreak of the coronavirus. So just to clarify that, there might be something happening. Otherwise, what we have planned from UN Women together with the government of Mexico and France is actually, should have been Mexico City, is to hold 2 sessions of Generation Equality. Generation Equality is our big campaign for 2020 to celebrate various milestones, particularly the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. But there's many others. They're 5 years, along with the Sustainable Development Goals, and we also have an anniversary for the Women, Peace and Security resolution. And the work that I'm leading on Women's Empowerment Principle has also been ongoing for 10 years. So there's a lot of celebrations, and we are hosting one forum in Mexico, which will be a smaller one at the ministerial level. The Paris one is a much larger conference that will be at the head of state level in July. And of course, we have the UN General Assembly 75th session. I have put 23rd of September. I think that is the date that we will have the special session on gender equality. It could also be around that date. So don't take that as an exact date, but most likely on this day. So we can go to the next slide. I talked earlier about the 12 critical areas of concern. We have had many discussions and consultations around the 6 action coalitions that we are setting up, and the 6 themes that we are going to focus on, which you will see from the critical areas of concern are very similar. So we still have gender-based violence, which has gone from 95 language as violence against women to gender-based violence, economic justice and rights. A new topic that was more captured under health at a time is now bodily autonomy and sexual and reproductive health and rights, has been very clearly spelled out, and I think this relates to many of you. Another area, 2 other new areas actually, are the climate justice and technology and innovation. These are areas that we see both a very strong role for women, but also where women are impacted very strongly if they are not part of these sectors and this type of work. And the final one is really about the feminist movement and leadership. We also have 7 cross-cutting areas. So these are the areas that will be addressed in each of the action coalitions. And it goes from finance to transforming gender norms. And I see some faces here from men, so I'm very welcoming your participation. And this is an area that is very important for us to engage men and boys in this. Gender equality is an outcome for all of us. And the way to get there is, of course, to empower women, but the ultimate gender equality is for both women and men. Law and policy reform is very important. Education, gender data, and accountability. We know that that often drives action. When we have evidence, we take evidence-based decisions. Intersectionality has also come very strongly since the adoption in '95 of the Beijing Declaration has come to be very, very important. And we have also seen this in the area of the Millennium Development Goals, that is not enough to just look at men and women differently, but there are so many other intersectionalities that play a role in whether there are discriminated and there are biases against them. And then, of course, structural inequalities is key to this. So those action coalitions are, we put out a call for letters of intent to hear from organizations and companies and others, governments, in what areas they're interested in. We are now sorting through all the applications on who would like to be part of these coalitions to really drive the 6 actions. So I mentioned earlier the Women's Empowerment Principles. What we have, which is also different from '95, is that we today have the private sector with us. There is a lot of interest from the private sector to contribute to the agenda, to the Sustainable Development Goals, as well as to the gender equality, particularly SDG 5. And our Women's Empowerment Principles is the roadmap for the companies to implement the SDG 5. And there are 7 goals, and you will see many of them are talking about workplace issues, marketplace issues, supply chains. But again, what is really key is high-level corporate leadership and measurement and reporting. I think that was the last slide. Yes. So I will leave it at that, and I look forward to questions and also for our discussion today.
Thank you so much, Anna, for that really helpful overview for all of us. As Julia mentioned, hi everyone, my name is Megan Akins. I'm CanWatch's Director of Strategic Partnerships and Gender Equality, going to moderate the next 40 minutes or so that we really have dedicated to an opportunity for us to have a discussion. But first, I thought I'd echo Anna's invitation for any questions for her specifically around the upcoming activities on Beijing Plus 25 and the Generation Equality Forum. If you'd like to, I'd also encourage, just in case there's many questions, that we could, if you could just include them in the chat box, that would be really helpful. I'll give everyone a few moments to think about that. Maybe while we're,
I've seen that there's a few comments about the language. So if there are questions in French, I'm also happy to take them.
Perfect. Thank you, Anna. Maybe while we're waiting for those questions to come in, I'm wondering if you might be able to give everyone a deeper sense of what the opportunities to either attend either Mexico City or Paris, or what opportunities might exist for people to participate from their home countries.
Mm-hmm. So the Mexico, because it's a smaller type of forum, will be different from the Paris one. In the Paris one, what we have foreseen is also a call for proposals for different sessions. So that will be an opportunity for NGOs. I see that question from Shelley. So there will be an opportunity for NGOs to express interest to organize an event in Paris and to contribute to the agenda. I see. Shall I just, are you taking the questions, or shall I just read them?
You're welcome to, if there's questions that sort of make sense to you, Anna, feel free. And if we kind of get inundated with questions, I'll be happy to filter them for you.
Yeah. So, I mean, what we have and what you might have experienced with the Commission on the Status of Women is that there is NGOs that have the representative role with the Economic and Social Council, the ECOSOC. And to have that status is required to participate as an official civil society organization to its subsidiary bodies like the Commission on the Status of Women. What we have seen though, in regards to the question about the grassroots, small organizations and how they can participate, is to link up with those organizations in the home country that has the consultative status with ECOSOC, that they can ask to be part of the delegation of that organization. But I also know that in general years, not particularly this year, which is a little exceptional, that NGOs are also organizing their own events outside the UN. And that is, of course, open to the organizer of those events to allow other participants that don't have the ECOSOC consultative status. And the role of the civil society in the Action Coalition. So we are seeking really committed organizations, both governments and the private sector coming with funding and other type of support, and civil society to kind of line up and contribute to the implementation of the priorities that are being identified by each of those action coalitions. In terms of the women's empowerment principles, maybe we can just go back one slide. There is one, the number 3, you can see it here, but the one with the heart is employee health, well-being, and safety. So this addresses both that we encourage companies to make sure that their employees are covered by health insurance, but also that they are safe at work and from and to work. It also covers issues of violence and sexual harassment in the workplace and from and to work as well. So we have companies that are taking action to really safeguard the well-being of their employees.
The next question is really around, and I think it comes back to these women empowerment principles as well, Anna, about women who are returning to work after extended absences from the workforce for whatever reason, and that it's often considered an invisible issue that is, you know, predominantly faced by women. And is there any sort of global movement or organizations who are operating worldwide around this particular issue faced by women?
Mm-hmm. That's a very good question that we are very concerned about. We talk about it as, and when we speak with companies, we talk about re-entry policies. So that we go beyond talking about the recruitment, the retention, the promotion of women, but for them to also experience equal pay. For example, we also need to have very conscious and targeted re-entry policies. So re-entry, whether it is from maternity leave or other care responsibilities or whatever reason, the person has had to take time off from the workplace. I don't know exactly about a movement per se, but we are working both on the equal pay side of it and also on the other HR related issues to guide companies. So I would be happy to hear more about these type of issues and concerns. We are in the process of preparing a guidance note for companies on how to tackle these issues. It is very important, and I know the government of France, for example, has advised employers to make sure that when women return back from parental leave, that they are up for an upgrade in their pay, so that for the time that they missed, that they are not missing out on increases in salaries and other pay. And also so there's a few governments that are tackling that, but also on and trying to understand what are the re-entry practices that you can have as an organization to make sure that women are not left behind because they've been out for some time. And this is particularly important in areas of technology and innovation where things are moving really, really fast. And there's a big risk that women will fall behind because they've been out, even if for a few months.
The next question we have is around youth participation and what opportunities might be available, whether both in Mexico City as well as Paris.
So youth participation is actually key, and I should have mentioned that earlier. It is really what we want to do, and we know that many of the youth do not necessarily know about the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action because they were not born yet, or were too young to participate. So this is key for us to make sure that we have as many young people involved as possible to carry this agenda forward. So the generations that were in Beijing would not be able to carry this agenda forward for very long. So we need the youth to engage. So we are trying to raise funds for their participation from different governments and private sector to support us to make sure that youth can participate, contribute, and then carry whatever work forward into the future. Preferably not beyond 2030.
Thank you. And the maybe one question I know that I've been getting a lot from our members is around like when people should start to look for registration to be available for the Generation Equality Forums. If that's on the radar yet. I know the website was launched, but if there's any sense of timing.
Yeah, I think that currently we are dealing with the crisis of the toned down CSW, but I think later on in the month we might have kind of steered our efforts from the CSW to the first conference in Mexico. I think that the most open participation will be in Paris, though. The space in Mexico City is limited, and in total, I think there will be about 2,000, whereas in Paris there will be more, about 6,000-7,000. So if you are looking to prioritize your participation, I think Paris would be a better, and it's also further into the future, and hopefully we have resolved our global health issues by then.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Anna. Are there any other questions? I do see one around whether materials will be available, and to answer that question, absolutely. As I think Julia mentioned, but we'll be happy to follow up with everyone following this with both the presentation as well as notes from the session. If there's any questions that weren't answered, we'll answer that. And to be clear, it will be made available in both official languages. So will be both in English and French. And again, apologies to those who are having some of those language challenges, but we'll be happy to follow up separately afterwards. I think we can turn to the next topic. And this is really about, again, as Julia mentioned, understanding why in a given year, people are focusing their concerted attention and efforts around the Beijing Plus 25 movement, the initiatives that are underway, and really wanting to understand what does Beijing Plus 25 mean to your organization? Why are you participating? And more broadly, what does it matter to our sector, Canada's global health and gender equality movement? Yeah, just really wanting to launch into a discussion around that. And so I'll open the floor to anyone who'd like to jump in.
Good afternoon. My name is Marissa Kokoros. I'm speaking from Aura Freedom. We're an organization based in Toronto, and we work to end gender-based violence. So for us, Beijing Plus 25 has meant the creation of our report entitled Relentless Resilience. So what we have done is we've gone around to different frontline organizations in Toronto, as well as survivors and activists, and we've interviewed them, as well as done extensive data mining and policy review. And we put together a report, a snapshot on the situation of women and girls and violence in Toronto, as well as gender non-binary and trans women. And so we created the report. We actually launched it and released it, published it last week, and sent it to NGO CSW and UN Women. And we did have an event to launch the report in New York, which has now been canceled. And so what it means for us now is how can we, as the community here in Canada, get together, even though CSW is not happening? How can we amplify our efforts? For us, we want to see prevention. That's what we're hearing. Prevention that looks at the root causes of violence. Why is the violence still happening? Why are the most marginalized women experiencing the most horrific violence? Why are Indigenous women still being killed, et cetera, et cetera? So this matters. So Beijing Plus 25 is everything to us. And that's why we're participating, and we're really open to collaborating with anyone on the call here from Canada or Toronto for some more local events that we might be able to do based on some partnerships.
Thanks, Julia. Sorry about that.
I was like, this is awful quiet for a while. Sorry, yeah.
Sorry, thank you. I just wanted to say thank you to Aura Freedom for sharing the report with CanWatch. Please feel free, if it's available online, to post a link to the chat box, but otherwise perhaps we could include it with the resources that will be circulating following this webinar. I think it will be of great interest to those on this call, as well as maybe others in your networks. Also inviting others to jump in if they'd like to share about what your organizations are thinking about Beijing Plus 25, how your plans may be evolving, etc.
Hi there. Can I join in to pitch my?
Of course.
Yeah, okay. Hi, I'm Rina. I'm from Vancouver, and I'm representing British Columbian Nepali Canadian Women's Society. So this is a very small and young organization. And what I want to, our interest is to voice our small community of Nepali women, which is a very minority ethnic community in the Canadian, in the whole of Canadian sector, and representing from the British Columbian part. So what we want to voice is like the double burden. Of course, the women all over the world have the double burden of working outside and inside, working as a career woman and then building up their home. And for these women who is residing in a different sector, immigrating in a different sector, they have, should I say, triple burden, because they have this ethnic the settling down problems, and they have these different issues. So what I was hoping is like, if we can voice through this organization the problem these women are facing, the issues these women are facing. If we can also put a light on it, then it would, I think we can get a new perspective maybe and voice out the problem the issues that we are facing, not only the problems or the opportunities also that we are facing in a positive vibe. So that's our main interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Rina, for sharing. Really excited to learn about your organization, and look forward to connecting separately.
Yeah,
I do see one additional question, maybe, and apologies for jumping, but just around is Beijing Plus 25 the same as generation equality, and what is the difference? Wondering, Anna, if you might be able to jump back in just to provide that additional context.
Cool. So the Commission on the Status of Women is an intergovernmental fora. So the decision makers in the Commission on the Status of Women are really the member states that form part of the Commission, the members of the Commission, with, of course, the support and guidance from civil society. The two generation equality fora are really multi-stakeholders. So we are bringing in all the stakeholders to really discuss what is the unfinished agenda of since 95. What can we do together to really focus on the next 5 years? The Commission on the Status of Women are more kind of looking at and reviewing through, and actually I have not had the chance yet to look at the political declaration and what's in there, but normally that is a document that makes the member states committed to and they make their statement on the commitment to the issues and how they see the next steps. But this is their document. And what we want with the generation equality is that we have all the stakeholders, all hands on board, all hands on deck to really kind of take the next push for the next 5 years. So it is not an intergovernmental fora, even though the governments of Mexico and France are hosting us. It is truly multi-stakeholder. I hope that clarifies.
Thank you, Anna. And I see Karen, you have your hand up, so would like to turn the floor over to you.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I'm Karen Tischler. I'm also in Vancouver, and if I understood it correctly, then Rina had maybe somewhat of a similar aspect of her focus. So basically, I am an advocate for professionals returning back to the paid workforce. And as you said before, these are mainly women. I'm originally from Germany, and as I'm living here and in Vancouver, but I speak German, I've done basically best practice research across the world to better understand what possibilities, methods, and ways there are to get these professionals back to the paid workforce. And a lot of it is not in English because it is in European countries. So what I have decided to do is to start a podcast called Job Sharing and Beyond, because I truly believe the two main issues that these women trying to come back after 5, 10, 15 years is that there isn't enough flexible work, nor is there enough recognition of the care work they have done and the transferability of the soft and business skills that they have actually learned. And so by interviewing people, corporate leaders in Germany and other European countries that, for example, have successfully implemented job sharing across all managerial positions, I am hoping that that will raise more awareness of what is already being done and can be done, in particular in Canada as well as in the US, because I feel this is such an invisible part of the workforce. And if that can be solved as a problem for this generation, then going forward, especially as millennials are more interested in a better work-life balance, it will help everybody. And lastly, what I feel though, we need to make sure that that is while the majority of the people trying to return back to paid work are women, it is really a topic that men have to be involved with, because only if we have equal care and less of, I would call, secret parenting, especially of leaders, then we can, move forward together and help these professionals return back to the paid workforce. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Karen. Is there anyone else who wants to share a little bit either about why your organization is thinking about Beijing Plus 25, or more broadly, if you what you're thinking about in terms of tactical engagement? Give it a moment. So if there's no one else looking to jump in, I wanted to extend first and foremost just a really, really big thank you to Anna for joining us today, sharing your unique insights and expertise. It was really interesting to hear you speak, but also to learn about the women's empowerment principles. And I encourage all of you to maybe do a little bit more reading. I know that I certainly will be about that piece of work. And also just a really sincere and profound thanks to all of you for joining us. I know incredibly busy time for those who were planning events or planning to attend CSW. There's all sorts of things to be done in these coming days in terms of canceling or postponing the work. And so thank you again. As we had mentioned on the Eventbrite and the communications, this is really intended to be a first in a series of discussions that we're going to be having over the course of the next few months. So while we were intending for today to be sort of a pre-CSW moment to gather to set the stage for the next, from now till September and beyond, we look forward to reconvening with our members and partners and mobilizers to in advance of each of the moments that are still to come. So we look forward to later this spring having a discussion prior to the Mexico City Generation Equality Forum. And then again, following Paris, following UNGA, etc. Our hope is that we'll be able to, that as Anna's hope has expressed hope, our hope is certainly that the global health security concerns will have been addressed and that we'll be able to gather as planned. So we look forward to creating a space to share events and opportunities from your own organization to facilitate potential collaboration. And to really talk about how collectively we can drive progress on the sustainable development agenda by 2030, especially anchoring our efforts around SDG 5. So I ask that all of you keep an eye on your inboxes and on CanWatch's social media for more details. Again, we'll be circulating notes and presentations and resources following this webinar. Also invite you that if you would like to reach out to CanWatch directly, I encourage you to contact Aminata Worry if you have any further questions or need clarification. Her address is on the screen here. I'll maybe ask her as well to just post a link in the chat so that you can easily copy and paste. If you are in the next few months, if you have events or activities or reports planned that you would like to work with CanWatch to share and amplify, again, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, because we'd love to work together around this really exciting year. And again, just thank you so much and look forward to seeing you again at our next webinar. Thanks, everyone.